But remember, we're training, we're not exercising. So we're going to pick a stress that doesn't kill you or even harm you. So we're going to start you out light. And because we're training for a goal, we're going to start the work light. That light work will be enough stress for you, and then you'll recover from it, and then you'll be able to do a little bit more.
You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. I am Scott Hambrick. There is Matt Reynolds, and this is part 2 of the Getting Started series from Barbell Logic. And today we're going to talk about how do we get strong. Last show we talked about why strength, or maybe we should have titled it "So You Want to Get Fit? What should you do?" I don't know, but we talk about if you want to get fit, what is the best approach for the untrained athlete? And we make a case for that being training strength. And so today we're going to talk about, well, how, if you agree with that, then how would you best do it? And Matt has all the answers.
So I don't know if that's true, but we've told this story a couple times, so hopefully we're getting it honed in a little bit. You know, I often start this discussion with thinking about the person who is really uneducated in this world. And so maybe you're listening to this podcast and you heard the last one and you said, okay, strength is what I need to do. But what does that look like? Like, how do I do that? And unfortunately, in the United States, and I'm sure it's similar in most of the Western parts of the world, when you walk into a gym for the very first time, especially a big box, what we call a globo gym, especially if you're uneducated, so you've never really done this before, you've screwed around in a gym before, and you're looking around the gym, there are an infinite number of exercises to do. It's overwhelming, right? You go in, you're already nervous, you're already scared. As we talked about in the last episode, you've probably had something happen in your life that's sort of forced you to make an emotional decision to go join a gym. And whether it was a situation like what you went through where you bent over to tie your shoes and you couldn't catch your breath, or whether it's you're going through a divorce or a breakup or a loss of job or a health scare or whatever, you've made this emotional decision to go join a gym, and then you walk into the gym and you're like, oh my God, there's so much stuff. There are sometimes hundreds of machines. There are often scores or even hundreds of cardio pieces of equipment, right? And there's treadmills and there's bikes and there's ellipticals and there's steppers and there's all these things. There's the scary corner back there in the back with all the free weights, right? With like the barbells and the dumbbells and the scary guys. And you're just like, I don't even know where to start. Like for people who are listening who don't know, like you don't know where to start. And for people who are listening that have listened to us before, you have to realize your coworkers, your family, your friends, they don't know where to start. They're just going to the gym. What most people do in January, on January 1, when they're trying to change their life, is they just join a gym. But they know they're supposed to join a gym, but they don't know what to do after they pay their dues because there's just too much. And so what we do is we've been able to distill down the criteria we use to try to get the greatest return on our investment for the least amount of time, really, for a time economy. And I think the first concept that we need to discuss today is the difference between training and exercise.
Yeah, so to get strong, we have to train. You can't exercise your way to greatly increase strength. You have to train it.
That's right, because we're working towards a goal, right?
Yeah, and so it's a training. Training is where we take a rational approach to our athletic activity with a end goal in mind. Everything that we do would serve reaching that goal. Exercise might be just moving and being vigorous and sweating and huffing and puffing, but that we wouldn't call that training.
Yeah, and I also want to be very careful because I actually don't think there's anything wrong with exercise.
Yeah, I do.
I think exercise is often that, well, you said you do?
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. I think that exercise is the gateway drug to training.
Sure.
And so for people who just are ignorant, and I don't mean that in a negative sort of way, they just don't know.
Yeah, if you just don't know better.
I think joining the gym and like walking on the treadmill and, going through a kind of a circuit on machines because that's what you saw them write in Men's Health magazine or something, like I'm not ever going to make fun of somebody or make somebody feel bad who got off their couch, who was binge watching Netflix and eating potato chips, and they went to the gym and did something, even if the thing they did at the gym was far less than optimal.
Yeah,
I think it's important to note.
I agree. I'm not going to make fun of them or look down my nose at them, but when they go exercise, they get a little novice effect for a few sessions where they actually get a little stronger and get a little more fit because the novice effect works, and we'll talk about that in a later show. And then it quits working, and then they stop. But if they had trained from the beginning, they get good results. And you can train for any athletic activity, right? You can train to hold your breath longer and longer and longer.
Sure.
You can train to run or whatever.
That's right.
But if we trained, and they trained, if they had some help, whether they get it from our podcast or a book or a coach, they're going to meet their goals more quickly and be less likely to stop doing it after the beginning of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I don't like exercise. It doesn't get them what they thought they wanted.
That's right. So you're exactly right. So they don't get the return on that investment. And what's weird is I think what is often so attractive or seductive by exercise is that it actually does, you mentioned it actually does get you a return on investment for a very short period of time. So even people that go and have no idea what they're doing, and they go to the gym consistently for the first 3 weeks of January, and they walk on the treadmill, and they do the circuits on the machines, or they join the body pump class, or they feel so much better 2-3 weeks in. The problem is that there's a sort of enigmatic stop to that afterwards, 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, 3 months in. They're like, I'm doing the same thing that got me. I felt so much better those first 3 weeks. How come I'm not feeling any better anymore? And it's because your body adapted to the exercise. And the thing that training does is it takes advantage of our body's ability to adapt by continuing to increase the stress heavier or harder or more each session. That's what training does because we're working towards a goal. So when we talk about adaptation, I think the next concept we need to look at is the GAS, the General Adaptation Syndrome. What is that? Tell our listeners what that General Adaptation Syndrome is.
Well, the theory lets us predict. It has predictive power. So we know that if an organism subjects itself or is subjected to a stress, if that stress doesn't kill that animal, it'll recover from it, and then it will adapt to be more hardy in the face of that stress. So for us, if we pick up something heavy and it makes us really fatigued and wrecks us, but we go home and we sleep and we eat and we recover, then we will exhibit an adaptation after we recover for doing that kind of stress. Here's the shorthand. You pick up heavy stuff and you program right, you eat right and you sleep right. When it's over, you'll be stronger than you were when you got started.
Yeah. Your body adapts to the thing that you did.
So this is important.
You get a little better each time.
This is the whole thing behind training versus exercise. With training, we're trying to pick a stress that after we recover from it gives us the thing that we want. And in episode 1, we decided that the thing we want is strength. So when we train, we carefully pick the things that we do in the gym to get us our stated goal, which is increased strength.
That's great. And then the next step from the General Adaptation Syndrome, which is it's a thing that's been out there for almost 100 years at this point now. We know it's that idea that famous term, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like that's literally comes from that. But you segued nicely into the next step, which is really what we call the SAID principle, SAID, which is the specific adaptation to impose demands. And that feels like it's all like scientific-y, and I don't know what that means. All it basically means is that your body's going to adapt to the thing you did. If I squat, I'm going to get better at squats. I'm not going to get better at swimming.
And
if I swim, I'm going to get better at swimming. I'm not going to get better at squats.
Yes. And this adaptation isn't just getting better at the movement. It's not practice. The tissues, so your bones, your ligaments, your tendons, your muscles, and even your lungs and your blood.
That's right.
Get better at making your body squat. So your lungs and your blood, you need glycogen, you need ATP, you need nutrients in your blood to serve these muscles so that they can contract strongly and help you squat. So you get better, your body gets better at providing your muscles with those things. Everything adapts. Your bone density goes up. You become less sensitive to, you become more sensitive to insulin, and so on and so on. And all of those things are part of the adaptation that takes place.
Yeah, so that's the scientific explanation of what we're doing when we say we're going to train instead of exercise. And I think from a mental standpoint, we talked about this last week a little bit about the ideas of voluntary hardship and the sort of refining power that occurs when we're in the gym. When we train, we have to consider ourselves as if we are athletes, even though we're not, right?
Well,
let's be honest.
I disagree.
You don't even have to consider yourself that way?
I think when everybody...
Or you think we are?
Well,
athletes?
I think we are. I disagree that we aren't. We just might not be very good.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I'm just being honest about the fact that, there are going to be people listening to this who are 72. It's going to be very difficult for them to consider themselves athletes. As Jonathan Sullivan, Dr. Sully says, he says, you're athletes of aging. You literally have to consider yourself in the same way that an Olympic athlete would train for their sport in the Olympics. We're going to train for strength. We're going to train to increase force production. And we're going to be very specific about that. We're not going to increase force production by swimming in a swimming pool or by doing yoga or whatever else it is. Not that there's anything wrong with those things. It's that those things, those are exercise. That's exercise. We are going to train to increase force production, and we are going to pick enough stress in the weight room, in the gym, that disrupts our body's normal homeostasis and forces our body to adapt to that thing. And then we're going to come in a few days later, and we're going to do it again, but we're going to make it a little bit harder, because that's what training is. My cousin likes to be able to bench press 225 for a set of 5. He's 40 years old. It's like, as long as I can bench press 225 for a set of 5, I'm good. So guess what his workout is every time he does bench press? 225 for a set of 5. Mm-hmm. Now here's the question. At this point, the guy isn't training at all. He's not disrupting homeostasis at all. His body has already adapted to be able to do the thing. If he ever wanted to get stronger, he would have to do more than 225 for a set of 5. He would have to bench press 230 or 240 or do more reps than 5 or something more, right? And that's what training is. Training is working towards that goal. And so we actually have to have a defined goal. I like goals that are clearly answerable. I want to be able to squat 300 pounds. Okay, we can pursue that goal. I can know, even if my squat on day 1 is 70 pounds, if after 2 weeks my squat is 85 pounds, I am clearly moving towards the goal of squatting 300 pounds.
Yep.
If the goal is, I want to be less fat, that's hard to quantify. Now, certainly you could I guess you could go get a DEXA scan, or you could go get a real body fat percentage scan, or I want to have abs, or I want to be leaner, or I want to be more muscular. Those things are very hard to quantify. So one thing we like about strength is that it's easy to quantify. Force production, where you're able to put more weight on the bar, right? Or maybe if you're an aesthetics person and you're listening to this, you're like, I currently wear a 42 waist jeans and I'd like to get into a 36. That's quantifiable. Mm-hmm. I'm a female. I'm in a size 16. I'd like to get down to an 8. That's quantifiable. We can quantify that, right? And so those things are important. So we're always working towards that goal. And when we train, we're training towards a goal. Now, so we go back to the gym. I'm walking into the gym. There are an infinite number of exercises I could do. I don't know where to start. Here's what I know. I want to do strength training, and I want to actually train. Strength, training. I want to work towards improved strength. How do I take this infinite number of exercises and begin to pare it down to a manageable number of exercises that gets me the greatest bang for my buck? What are the criteria that we start to use to identify, okay, this is actually going to do the thing you want, which is to train you for strength? And what are those three primary criteria we use for picking the exercises? Again, infinite number of exercises, all those machines, all that cardio, some of those free weights. Where do I start? And I can begin to apply some criteria to that.
Yeah, we have to have criteria. Otherwise, you're just picking at random. You can just be coin flip or throw a dart to figure out what you're going to do. So the criteria that we use, and it's not just that we use them. It's not just that, we use them. We use them because these criteria work. We know it works. We want to pick exercises that train the most muscle mass, and let us, and we can put the most weight possible on the bar. And we want to make the weight move over the longest effective range of motion. Is that the order you wanted to hear them in?
Yeah, you did great.
Good.
Thanks, Boo.
Yeah, so I think these make sense. So we can start in the beginning. We know that strength is force production. It's the ability to produce force against an external resistance. And the only thing that does that is our muscles. That's the only way we can do it. We don't have electric motors. We don't have an internal combustion engine. We have the contractile force of our muscles. So if we want to find exercises or particular movements that we can train to get more force production out of our bodies, the more muscles they use, since that's the only place the force comes from, that makes perfect sense. Yep. And then the other two, well, then the next one follows from that. If it trains more muscle mass will be involved in the movement of the barbell. The more muscle mass that we have training and moving the barbell, the more weight we can put on the bar. So those two kind of help each other.
It just makes logical sense, right? If one exercise uses twice as much muscle mass as another exercise, then it would make sense that the exercise that uses twice as much muscle mass would be able to use also more weight.
Yep.
Because there's twice as much muscle mass.
Yep.
To move the weight.
And I noticed that you said more. It does not follow that it will use twice as much. Move twice as much weight. That doesn't follow. I wish it did, dang it.
Yeah.
But
it might literally only be 5%.
Yeah.
More muscle mass.
But it's important. And then the third criteria is over the longest effective range of motion. And I think you and I could debate this. I think that is important because it gives us training economy.
Sure.
And it allows us to use a smaller number of movements.
Sure. More work for less time, range of motion, right? Also, I would argue that the greatest effective range of motion will also tie back to the criteria number one of training the most muscle mass.
Well, true.
If I don't move very much, if I don't move the barbell very far, the range of motion isn't very much, how much did my muscle mass actually get trained? If muscle mass, I think most people know that muscle mass it contracts, it lengthens and contracts. So it can get longer and shorter. And there are these sort of filaments that slide over each other and contract. Well, if they don't move very much, that's how a muscle works, right? It's the sliding filament theory. It slides over. If it doesn't move very much, then the muscle didn't contract very much, or it didn't lengthen very much, or it didn't go through a full range of motion. And to be able to work the muscle in the most effective way possible, it needs to go through really a near full range of motion, right? And the greater the range of motion, the more work we're going to get. And so it just makes logical sense that if we take all those potential infinite number of exercises in a gym and apply those criteria of training the most muscle mass, using the most weight for the greatest effective range of motion, then we immediately start to throw out not one or two or 10 or scores, but hundreds of exercises get thrown out on the effectiveness rating. And we go from an infinite number of exercises down to a very small number of exercises that we can do that will give us the greatest return on investment for training for force production or strength.
That's right. And we'll go into this for each of the movements we use. We'll go into this in depth in a future show. But for example, we would much rather have you squat than do a leg extension. Leg extension is going to use the quads. That's it. It's not very much muscle mass, but in the squat, the quads still have to extend the knee, but now our rump is working, our back is working, everything is working. So we would prefer the squat. You can squat way more than you can leg curl, so we get to use a lot more weight, and then the weight stack in the leg curl moves X, whatever distance that is. And we move the squat over a lot longer range of motion than the leg curl moves. So it meets all the criteria, so we throw out the leg curl. Okay, we would rather squat than that. And we could compare the squat to every other potential movement.
That's right.
And we come, no matter where we turn, we come back to the squat. And so after applying these criteria, we end up with our 4 big movements, which are the press, the bench press, the squat, and the deadlift.
Yeah, those are the 3 big ones. And so for the person who doesn't understand, who's listening to this, and they don't really understand anatomy, we want to make it really, really simple. When we say to choose exercises that train the most muscle mass, what we mean is that you're going to choose exercises that make the most number of joints move, bend. That's a pretty simple way of saying it, right? So if you think about a basic leg extension machine, which is that machine where you're sitting down on a chair, like in a chair, and your knees are going from bent to straight, how many joints move?
1.
Yeah, your knee,
One
your
knee.
knees, right? Like one knee or both knees. Whereas on a squat, if a bar is on your back, and we're not even talking about how to perform a squat correctly, we're just talking about just doing a squat, right? You put the bar on your back, you squat down, you squat back up. Well, then how many joints are moving? Well, certainly the knees are too, but what else?
Hips.
The hips obviously bend.
To a
What else
lesser
bends?
extent, ankles.
The ankles bend. And then there's a whole nother set of muscles that get worked,
They get worked, but they don't bend.
but they don't bend.
All of your vertebrae have to be held immobile. And so the muscles of the back have to work to do that.
That's right.
So the muscles, they exert force. They can either contract or relax, or they can maintain their length. I think called that isometric contraction. And all the muscles in the back have to be held in isometric contraction so that the squat doesn't bow you over. There are 33 vertebrae in a normal person, and almost every one of those has to be held perfectly still to execute a good squat.
I love that you remembered how many vertebrae there were.
I believe that's right.
I couldn't have done that.
I think there are 33. The cervical ones, but really there shouldn't be a weight on them other than your big old noggin.
That's your neck, by the way.
Yeah.
Your neck. It's not your cervix, but your neck.
So when you lean over, though, even those have to work to keep your head held at the right angle. So we work.
Now, some of our listeners are thinking right now, they're like, "Wait a minute, I don't want to do that to my back. I'll hurt my back."
Well, but remember, we're training. We're not exercising, so we're going to pick a stress that doesn't kill you or even harm you. So we're going to start you out light, and because we're training for a goal, we're going to start the work light. That light work will be enough stress for you, and then you'll recover from it, and then you'll be able to do a little bit more. So for some people, that's a body weight squat. For some people, that's even an assisted squat where I have them squat on a rubber band to help them get up out of the bottom. But by and by, we increase the stress a little bit, and then they recover, and they're stronger. And then we can increase it a little bit, and then that leaves them a little stronger. So that brings us to the next thing. We talked about the exercise selection. Well, how would we actually do the exercises? And we do them with barbells.
Yep.
Because they give us such infinite training variability. I can start you with a broomstick or no stick on your back, and you can squat the body weight. And then I can give you my 1 pound broomstick and put that on your back and put a few more little weights on that up until you get a standard barbell on your back of 20 kilograms. And then we can add 1 pound to that up until 1,400 pounds.
Sure.
If you want. So we have an enormous amount of training variability that we get in the barbell that we cannot get in a machine.
That's right. Yeah, the number of muscles that are trained with a barbell and free weights are far greater than the amount of muscle mass trained in a machine that's on a fixed plane, or it just uses basically like a hinge that you're just going to move it through the range of motion that it tells you it's going to move it in.
Yeah,
and with the barbell and free weights, you're forced to keep it in balance over your midfoot or over what, if you're on a bench press, over your shoulder. Like, that doesn't have to happen on a machine. And because a machine tells you where the weight is going to go, then you're actually going to use less muscle mass to move that piece.
Yeah, we don't have a machine to stabilize the barbell other than the machine that is our body. So
That's right.
we end up using more muscle mass because there's nothing to stabilize it.
And then what will happen is, for those of you who are listening, you're thinking, well, I have a bad back, or I have bad knees, or I have this injury or that injury, and the point is that as we add just a little bit of stress each session, the muscles around that spot, whatever it is for you that hurts, or maybe it's multiple places that hurt, become stronger, and a stronger back is a more resilient back. It's less vulnerable to injury, not more. And everybody knows this, right? Like, when you're listening to it, you're like, well, but sometimes my doctor or my physical therapist or my chiropractor says I shouldn't do this because I could injure my back. And they're right. And they're scared that you might actually hurt yourself and sue them if they give you the okay. But everybody knows, if we think about it logically, if my back gets stronger, it's going to be more resilient and less vulnerable to injury. And if I have bad knees and my knees are taking the brunt of the force of everything I do, and instead I build up the muscles around the knee, I build up the quadriceps, which is on the front of the knee, and I build up the hamstrings and the calves on the back of the knee, then now my ligaments, like my ACL or my MCL or my PCL or my patella tendon, take far less force. They have to handle far less beating because the muscles are able to handle that for them.
I think we've made our case, but now I want to tell them actually how we do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we use a thing that we call the Novice Progression, where you're going to do two, if you want to get strong. We've applied these criteria to select the movements. We've applied these criteria to figure out that we want to do the movements with barbells and not the Smith machine or any other thing that's possible. So we know we're going to go to the gym and we're going to use a barbell to do the squat, the press, the bench press, and the deadlift.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so I want to be clear. We keep talking about doing the squat, the deadlift, bench press, and the press. How many additional exercises do they need in the beginning?
Nothing for a very long time.
Literally nothing.
Yep, because the whole body, but through using these four movements, virtually your entire body is going to be trained.
That's correct.
Our three criteria got us that. So day one, you're going to go in, you're going to squat. We're going to call this day A. You're going to squat, bench press, and deadlift. You're going to squat 3 sets of 5. You're going to bench press 3 sets of 5, and you're going to deadlift 1 set of 5. And you're going to pick a weight that's light enough that you can move that weight perfectly, but it's some work. It's some work. Don't be too aggressive. You're just going to pick something that you can move and that feels somewhat taxing, and do 3 sets of 5 for the two movements and 1 set of 5 for the deadlift. That's it. Then you go home. Now, remember, we talked about the stress recovery adaptation thing earlier. So we've gotten a stress. So you're going to go home and you're going to eat and you're going to sleep. Now you're recovering from the stress, and you're going to go in Wednesday and you're going to be stronger because you will have adapted. And on Wednesday, you're going to do workout B, which is the squat, the press, and the deadlift. You're going to squat a little bit more weight. If you're very elderly, that might be a very small amount of weight more. If you're very young and very robust,
1 pound.
It could be 1 pound. If you're very robust and a young man who's 19 years old, it could be 20 pounds more. But whatever you do, it's going to be weight that you can move with perfect form. You're going to do that with the squat. This is going to be your first time pressing, so you're going to work up to that moderate weight for a set of 5 again. And now you're going to deadlift.
For people that are listening, let's go ahead and define. So when we say a set of 5 or 3 sets of 5, we literally mean you're going to warm up with an empty bar, add a little weight. You're going to do 5 reps. So you're going to do 5 squats in a row or 5 presses in a row. Then you're going to rack the bar. You're going to wait a few minutes. You're going to put a little more weight on. You're going to do it again. So when we say 3 sets of 5. What we mean is you're going to work up to a weight that you can do for 3 rounds of 5 reps. So you're going to do, maybe that's first day, maybe that's 75 pounds. And you're going to do 5 repetitions with 75 pounds. You're going to wait a few minutes. You're going to do 5 more repetitions with 75 pounds. You're going to wait a few minutes. You're going to do 5 more reps with 75 pounds. That's 3 sets of 5. Sometimes we call that 3 sets of 5 across. Across means the weight stays the same for all of the sets, right? And we're going to do 3 sets of 5 for the squat, the press, and the bench press. And then as Scott will pick back up on the deadlift, we usually will just do 1 relatively heavy set of 5 repetitions for the deadlift. So go ahead. So back to workout. So workout B, you've done your squat. Now you're doing your press.
Yep. It's the first time you've done the press. So it's a lot like Monday was in terms of the press. You're just going to work up to something moderate that you can do with perfect form. And we will teach you how to do that perfect form here soon. And then you're going to deadlift for 1 set of 5. And remember, you deadlifted on Monday. So like the squat, you're going to put more, you have recovered from that work. You're now stronger. We're going to put more weight on the barbell. For somebody old, it could be very, very little extra weight, 2.5 pounds maybe. For someone who's young and robust, it could be 20, 25, 30 or so. But whatever that weight is, it must be weight that you can move with perfect form over the entire range of motion. So now we've done workout A and workout B. Well, Friday rolls around because we're training 3 times a week now. And we're going to repeat workout A. We're going to squat, bench press, and deadlift. The squat and
with one minor change, right?
With one minor change, the squat and the deadlift go up from the Wednesday weights, and the bench press, we add a little weight from what we did on Monday.
That's right.
And then next week, we do session B on Monday, session A on Wednesday, and session B on Friday. And you repeat that, adding a little weight, which is stressing your body, recovering, and adapting 3 times a week, until it doesn't work. And so we call that the novice linear progression, and it works for a long time. If you're very elderly and very female, sorry, testosterone and being male makes people stronger. But if you're very elderly and don't make much testosterone, that might not last very long for you, this linear progression. It might be maybe even 3 weeks. But if you're very strong, very, very robust person who makes lots of these good hormones, it might be 20 weeks.
Yep.
And but everyone will be able to should be able to double their squat, even a very elderly person.
And deadlift probably close.
Yep. And a young man might take his squat from 135 to 400 in the course of doing this. But don't get too caught up on the numbers. The point for you is to undergo a little stress with perfect form. You're going to sleep 8 hours a night. You're going to eat your food because we need the nutrients and the building blocks to put those damaged muscles back together. And you're going to come back in and do more weight.
I'd say that average increase is about 5 pounds per workout per lift, right? So you're on average going to go up 5 pounds. Again, like Scott said, very young, very robust men might add a little more than 5 pounds. Older senior citizens and certainly those who are female may add a little less, but that's it. And the workouts are literally the same. Workout A, workout B, squat, press, and deadlift, squat, bench, and deadlift. What else do I need to do? Do I need to get on the treadmill? Do I need to just, nope, you do nothing. And the thing about that is you're like, it's so simple. And in the beginning, it's not even that hard. But over the course of time, it's going to get harder and harder, but it's not really going to get less simple for a while. And what we've found in our training and our coaching is that simple plus hard equals brutally effective. It's incredibly effective. You don't need to do all this crazy stuff. You don't need to do 20 different exercises. You don't need to come in and exercise 5 or 6 or 7 days a week. Your sessions don't need to take 2 hours. You just literally can come in and do 3 exercises per day, 3 days a week, and make incredible progress for a pretty long time.
And that program works because it meets our criteria by doing the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, and then the squat, the press, and the deadlift. You're going to exercise almost every muscle in your body, maybe not those in your inner ear, but just almost every muscle in your body. And you're going to subject them to that stress. You're going to recover. You're going to show that specific adaptation we were looking for. Remember, that was for strength, and it works.
That's right.
We don't pick those movements because we love them. We've come to love them because they work. We didn't pick them because we love them. We didn't pick them because we were dogmatic and we wanted to pick them. We picked them because all roads, when you're training for strength, lead to those 4 lifts. I don't know what else to say about that.
No, that's great. I think that's everything you need to know. So that's two episodes in now. You know why we want to get strong, and you know the big picture ideas of how we're going to get strong. And on the next episode, we're actually going to talk about those 4 lifts in more detail. Like, here's exactly how to perform a squat, or here's exactly how to perform a deadlift, and why these specifically, much more practically, why these 4 lifts fulfill those criteria so well. And we're going to continue with those ideas of simplicity, intensity. Intensity just means how heavy, and economy, because we want to respect your time in the gym. We want to be able. Most people who listen to this podcast are professionals who have lives outside of the gym, and so we understand that you're not trying to be a professional bodybuilder, professional powerlifter, or any sort of fitness athlete, but we do need you to think of yourself as an athlete. We need you to be able to commit 45 minutes or an hour 3 times a week. That's it. So for 3 hours or less a week for everyone, you can completely change your body. You can change your life. It will have residual effects that you cannot understand, positive residual effects on your mind, on your emotions, on your social skills. And you're just going to have to experience that to really understand what we're talking about. But that's it. Simple, hard, effective. It works every single time for every single person.
That's it. Future episodes, we'll cover, like Matt said, those 4 lifts. We'll talk about the equipment that you may need. We'll talk about how to keep notes and put your own training log together. We'll talk about
how to be safe.
We'll talk about safety. We're going to talk about the program itself. We'll talk about nutrition, and we'll talk a little bit about what you need to do when this novice linear progression stops working for you. And unfortunately, this is one of the saddest things in human experience is it doesn't work forever.
That's right.
But when it does work, it's the best thing that you could possibly do. Thanks for
why
listening.
Would you do anything else? If you can add a little weight to the bar every single time, why would I do anything else?
Yeah, maybe you don't like yourself very much.
Maybe. I like me.
Send this and the previous episode to a friend of yours that you want to get started barbell training. Send it to your mom who's having trouble getting out of her chair and off the toilet. By the way, have you seen on Instagram the hashtag Hambrick Challenge where people?
I saw we got tagged.
Yeah,
the guys were standing up out of the chair. So
so
one of our challenges from last episode, right, is can you stand up out of a chair in
No
balance
hands.
over midfoot with no hands? Can you just stand up on your own? And so we've got people tagging us on social media for that.
Lots of people can do that, but they discover in trying that it's a lot harder for them than they thought. And then there are a lot of people that struggle with their body weight or their age who cannot. And that's a really good little test to expose to people just how weak they've gotten.
Yep.
So try it out and post the Hambrick Challenge on Instagram and tag us in it, and get your mom. Thanksgiving's coming. When Mom's over, have her try it out.
Yeah.
Because if you've wanted her to train, I think that might be one of the things that you could do that would point out to her how
Make her
much
try
that
it
she
out
could
after
benefit.
she eats the turkey.
Yeah.
So she's like 7 pounds heavier. And she's like, oh man, I can't get out of this chair. You're like, see, you need to squat.
There you go, Mom.
That's the deal.
No more excuses, you old darling. Thank you guys so much for listening. Send this show to someone else. Leave us a review. Go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and let people know why they should be listening. If we get enough of those in a short enough period of time, it gets iTunes attention, and then they'll put us on one of their recommended lists. So it moves us up the fitness podcast list. And, we've been slowly moving up that over time, and we need to knock some of the momos off the top of that list. All right, talk to you guys very, very soon, and listen for the question and answer episode later in the week. Thanks. God damn the pusher man.